John 6:53. Litigabant ergo Iudaei ad invicem dicentes, quomodo potest hic nobis carnem suam dare ad manducandum? Therefore the Jews were arguing amongst themselves, or one with another, saying, how can this person give us his flesh to eat? Lots of interesting things going on in this verse, but we'll try to skip through them in a reasonable amount of time here. The first thing we want to note is that we've got a direct quotation. That's going to be important to understand for putting this whole verse together. But it also makes things a little bit easier as far as the grammar is concerned, I think. So we also want to note that this first syllable is long here, litigabant ergo Iudaei. The Jews were arguing, not launching lawsuits, as you might think, if you go by English derivatives. Of course, litigo does give birth over the centuries to a number of different words having to do with lawsuits and legal processes, but in origin, it really just means quarrel. Nevertheless, Erasmus thought that there were better choices that the translator could have used, and he offers pugnabant, which is a very literal and close translation of what the Greek actually says, which is emachonto. They fought, literally, were fighting with one another on this score. Pugnabant means about the same thing in Latin. He also says, our translator could have said decertabant. That's another word which means to vie with each other or argue or quarrel or dispute. Anyway, that's what they were doing. Third person plural, imperfect indicative active. Make sure you notice that characteristic ba. They were in the midst of doing this, saying, and there's a present active participle from our verb dicere. They were saying to each other, ad invicem. And we've talked about variations of this phrase before as they've shown up in the Gospel of John. It's best not to think too literally about the individual words and just recognize anytime you see invicem or ad invicem, you're talking about a kind of alternation, one person doing or saying something to another. Or if we have a large enough group, as maybe we do here, you can say amongst themselves, even something like that. So here's what these Iudaei have to say. How, literally by what means, does this man, that is to say, Jesus, by what means we might say, is he able, can he give to us carnem suam? Now you'll remember from our previous video that carnem comes from caro. This is a third declension noun. And in the genitive we had carnis, genitive singular. This is a feminine noun, which is what accounts for suam, not suum. Dare nobis carnem suam. How is he able to give us his own here, his own flesh? But really suam, the force, as so often in the Vulgate here, is weakened. The context itself makes it clear that this is his carnem that we're talking about, the one belonging to hic, this guy that we've been discussing. Now, the most interesting and fun, I think, piece of this whole verse is this last construction. This is ad, the preposition, plus the accusative form of a gerund. A gerund is a part of speech worth reviewing. It is a verbal noun, which means it functions mainly like a noun that has verbal properties. That is, it has the energy of action imbued into it like a verb, but you actually use it the way that you use a noun. So we can use the neuter accusative singular form of a gerund with the preposition ad simply to indicate purpose. And it's a wonderfully compact way to do that. If you ever have an opportunity to speak or to hear spoken a little Latin, you'll realize instantly when you hear this construction, man, that's a whole lot easier than other constructions like ut plus the subjunctive. It can be hard to think of how to conjugate something in the subjunctive mood right on the spot correctly. and using ut plus subjunctive is a less compact way of doing it. It usually involves you in having a longer subordinate clause. There's other ways, of course, also of indicating purpose, but this is a really compact, useful, and economical way of saying in order to do something. Ad manducandum, in this case, to eat, to give us his flesh to eat.